All right, it looks like we are live. Let's see. Welcome everyone to Mobile CSP's Hangout for Summer 2017 PD. Today's Hangout, we're going to focus on the Explore performance task. So for those of you going through the PD, you were tasked sometime today or this week to be looking at the Explore performance task and grading some student samples. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to get started with some introductions.
So I'll go ahead and introduce myself. I'm Jen Rosato from the the online side of the Mobile CSP professional development. And then why don't we turn it over to Deb?
Hi, I'm Deb Ramey. I am one of the master teachers. I'm working with the video task, and I also scored AP CSP exams this spring.
And John?
Hi, I'm John Filio, and I am a mentor for the Mobile CSP this summer. I also participated in the reading of the Explore exams for the AP board.
And Sarah?
Hi, I'm Sarah Sponhorst. I'm going to be a immersion week lead mentor teacher for that. And then I also did the Explore task for the AP reading in Kansas City this summer.
All right, thank you everyone. We're going to get some insights from them later. Right now we are going to just walk through a little bit about what we'll cover. So I'm going to go over some updates to the Explore #1 performance task. Pauline is going to go through some expectations for what you'll do during the professional development here around the Explore PT. A little bit on the discussion guide for master teachers as a reminder of things to be discussing. And then our lovely 3 master teachers here who have experience scoring are going to walk you through the rubric along with some tips for where students might struggle and where they see some errors. And then Pauline will just show you where to find the student samples and point out so that you are on the right track with those. Okay, so I'm actually going to exit out of my PowerPoint here and bring you to the student side of the Mobile CSP course. So this is the Explore Impact of Computing Innovations #1 performance task. It looks a little bit different this year for those of you who've used the curriculum before. We updated it just recently so that it now includes some more well-defined activities to help students learn about the research and writing process for the Explore performance task, as well as some pieces on finding credible sources, avoiding plagiarism, and then writing for writing in the technical area and how to write for a technical audience. So there's some activities around there that you want to take a look at the lesson plan and make sure that you think about incorporating them into your course. We also changed the topic for the Explore performance task so that this year we're going to, the practice one, focus on citizen science apps. So there's a video and an article about what citizen science is, and then the article walks through how citizen science apps are used and then gives some suggestions of ones that students could try out. So those are apps that use crowdsourcing. So people would install the app and they would be out in their boat, out in the woods, out in their community, collecting data, taking pictures of the sky, taking pictures of animals they see, that kind of thing, so that scientists could have a larger amount of data to be able to analyze and gather from the from all of those citizens that are participating in the process. So it addresses a couple of the learning objectives and essential knowledge statements in our in the CS Principles framework. If you change the topic, then you will not be addressing those learning objectives and essential knowledge statements, and you want to figure out a different way to do it. All right. So, but citizen science apps, we hope the students are going to enjoy those this year. And then the one thing that I would point out is there are some tips on the teach side with the lesson plan about what might be some negative impacts around citizen science and how that could be used. So one part that students seem to struggle with is identifying beneficial and negative. So there is in the lesson plan some tips on where you can direct students to start thinking about negative impacts from those apps. Okay, I will go back to the presentation here and turn it back over to Pauline here.
Hello again, everyone. So you are going to be looking at the Explore task during the PD. And for this, we want you to not do them, right, and to not complete them as the students would, but we want you to be aware of them and to know the different pieces and to be able to apply the scoring rubric to them. So we're going to ask you to read and review the Explore 1 and Explore 2 on the Mobile CSP site. So understanding the difference between the tasks. So Explore 1 being the practice, Explore 2 being the official, and seeing the differences there. Also reviewing the lesson plans as well. Explore 1 as the practice has a lot more suggestions and plans for you and ideas for you to help your students prepare for the official Explore 2. So you want to look at both the teach side and the student side for Explore 1 and Explore 2. We're asking you also to review the course and exam description booklet. So the slide before this has the booklet, the purple booklet. Everyone should have received that. So pages 107 to 117 has the breakdown of the task. This slide just gives a quick overview and the percentages that each of them count for. You want to make sure you're reviewing those pages in the booklet and understanding the guidelines for the students, as well as your guidelines as a teacher. There are specific guidelines and rules that the College Board has provided to you. And I joke with the teachers all the time and say, that's your best friend. That purple book is your best friend. You always want to refer back to it if you have questions. A lot of your answers can be found in there directly from the College Board. So you want to make sure that you're reviewing those relevant sections in the course and exam description booklet. Once you have done that, right, you should have a solid understanding of moving toward one of the task itself and what needs to be done. We'd like you to grade 2 of the College Board student samples. So going through those samples, we're looking for you to post a summary of your grading notes on your portfolio for your cohort or your master teacher to review and talk about and discuss with you. Or I know some of the groups, such as the hybrid PDs, you're going to be using a Google form to record your scores that you give to the samples that you review. And you're going to record your grading notes there, and then your master teacher can go ahead and review what you've put there to help guide the discussion that we have for you to do, which leads directly into the next part. After you grade 2 samples, you're going to discuss with your cohorts and your cohort members and peers and your master teachers about the grading and the task itself. Go to the next slide. So for our master teacher mentors, they're going to be helping you with reviewing the webinar, and they're going to have a discussion guide. So if they're watching us, there'll be a discussion guide available to them. We'll talk about that momentarily to help guide the discussion among your group. For the master teachers and mentors, please also let your participants know which way you want them to collect or provide the grading info that they're doing in their notes. So again, that's on their portfolio or in the Google form. You want to make sure everybody's doing it the same way. So you should check with your master teacher to know which way you'll be recording your grading. We want the master teachers to also share their experience with you about the Explore task. So your master teachers have taught the course before, and they have taught the Explore task. They've helped students and guided students in preparing for it, and they've been in the classroom when students have completed the official Explore 2 task, so they can offer you some helpful insight. So look to them for that and ask them questions that you have. They'll be able to help you answer most of those questions about implementing the task in the classroom. We're also asking the master teachers and mentors host webinars with their group. At some point, you'll have a meeting with your cohort, as you've been doing, to discuss the Explore performance task. So after you've done the grading, review the task and the rubric on your own and the student samples, we want you to meet as a group to discuss that. And the mentors will let you know, your math teachers will let you know when that's happening. Once everyone has entered their scores for the task, whatever form that may be in, we want the mentors to make sure, your math teachers to make sure that they are reviewing all of the scores that you've put in to make sure that you have indeed graded 2 student samples and to help with the discussion. So this document here is a discussion guide for the PD leaders, but we want to make sure it's shared with everyone to see kind of the process that you're going to be going through with reviewing this. I think some of these page numbers might need to be updated. You have your course and exam description, your purple book that you'll be looking through. You have the College Board samples are linked there with the links to the page on the College Board site. There were 5 samples that they had, but they removed 1. So there are now 4, A, C, D, and E. When you click on the link, it will take you to the student sample. So it's a sample response by a student, and these were taken from last year's pilot reading that they had. So the student samples are there for you to go through, so you would look through them, read through them, and apply the rubric. Try to apply the rubric to the student sample. So there are 4 just like that for you. And then the next thing is the grading rubric that was up above, which we will also talk about momentarily. We're going to go through the rubric with you. Once you have entered once you know where everything is, so you have the booklet with the task, you have the access to the samples, you have access to the rubric. Once you have everything, you're going to start off by going and entering your grades. You're going to score them. You're going to enter your grades however your master teacher tells you to do that. And then after you do that, you'll have your discussion with your master teacher about the scoring and the process that it took and any questions that you may have had about the rubric or the task itself. Right. And then afterwards, there is a commentary for each sample task, each sample for the Explore task. So the College Board samples have commentary that come with them. And after that discussion that you have, you're going to go back and you're going to look at what the College Board had given the students for their task and how they applied the rubric with some notes. So there is some commentary there. I think we're ready to go back to the slides. And I think you are ready to hear a little bit about this rubric to grade the task.
All right, can you hear me? Okay, so looking at the rubric to begin with, the first step is the computational artifact. And again, the rubric says using development process and tools, computational artifact identifies the computing innovation and provides an illustration, representation, or explanation of the computing innovation's intended purpose, function, or effect. This can be in a video. This can be in a poster. We had lots of pictocharts and things like that, kind of a poster representation. Probably one of the key things that I felt like we needed with this is to make sure that they list the innovation. Sometimes they had lots of pictures, but they didn't actually identify the innovation. And so that's probably one of the primary problems that we saw with number 1. That and the fact that just sometimes they were too wordy. So it's important to make sure that they have a good representation, that they indicate what the innovation is, and that it's not just words, that they have good representation of what it does or what they're talking about. I think that's it. Other thoughts, John and Sarah?
The only one that I had was that they had to be very specific about actually naming the innovation on the chart. So they couldn't just have like a pretty design. They had to actually show what it was with either a picture or actually stating the actual name of
it. The only feedback I have is as a teacher, you have the opportunity to go into their submissions and just make sure that they have submitted each of the different components of the assessment. So some students didn't provide a artifact, which then they lost the point for.
Yeah.
Okay, the next section is prompt number 2, which is analyzing the impact of the computation. This is the first writing portion of the assessment, and the students are supposed to provide a plausible fact about the computing innovation's intended purpose or function. The key word there is or, so they don't need to go into a lot of detail about both the purpose and the function, but they can. And I would strongly recommend that they start out their response with a sentence that includes the prompt. So whatever the innovation is, they should start out and say, this innovation's intended purpose is, and then describe that purpose. A key function of the intended innovation is, and then list or describe the function in a sentence. Some of the students got a little wordy, and sometimes we as readers had to go through and try to find the purpose and or function. The second part is for them to, as part of the analysis of their innovation, is to at least to identify at least one effect of the computing innovation. And that effect can be either positive or negative. And again, if they could just state this as a sentence, it would make it a lot easier for the graders to identify the effect that they were trying to document for the response. The next response is related to the beneficial effect or harmful effect that the computing innovation has. And they must explain how that impact has a potential impact to society, economy, or culture. Most students were able to come up with the purpose and or functions without really too much of a problem. And I would say that most students were able to come up with an effect, either harmful or beneficial. The challenge for most students was this number 4, and that was explaining how a specific effect had the impact on society, economy, and culture. Some students, from my experience when responding to this prompt, did an excellent job of supporting their statement as it related to the impact with references to specific statistics, for example. So to give you the car analogy, a lot of students would say the systems for an autonomous car could be hacked, causing the car to smash into a pole and have people die. The problem was with that type of response is that it didn't provide enough detail around what the effect was on society. They gave an example of how the impact could be negative to a person, but they didn't talk about how that impact would affect the society. Another example might be related to something in the health arena. So for example, some students would talk about applications that would help people to reduce weight or get more exercise. The students who earned the credit for this were able to tie the innovation to statistics or data that was related to how it impacted society, the economy, or culture. So for example, if it was to reduce weight, the impact of this would be beneficial to the society by improving the lifestyles of people and how you live longer, and they would have some statistics to support that. At least that would be the best way to look at how how you could best achieve the point for this particular question. Any other comments from Sarah or Deb?
Yeah. One of the things that I remember as they were teaching us and as we were grading this is always to, with that impact of the society, economy, or culture, first of all, it has to be more than just the one person, just one or two people died in this car wreck. How does it change our overall society? But the other thing was then to ask us, so what? And to answer the so what, it's like, okay, so they crash. So what? Well, this causes insurance, claims to go up, and or does it, how does it change things? If we have a safer society, that might impact us by having reduced rates and less deaths. They really had to make sure they answered that so what part of the question.
And one of the big things I took away from at least number 4 was that misuse is not a harm. So like if it gets hacked, that's not really a harm. It has to be directly related to the use of the innovation. So like if you're using a Fitbit, the harm couldn't be people can hack it and find out where you are. The harm would be like you become too focused on your device, and then you are, become, I don't know, your health declines because of your using the device and because you're focusing too much on what you're eating and how much you're working out, and then society has more health issues type of thing. All right, and then I will start on criteria 5. So this is all about data. I will tell you that 4, 5, and 6 were the least frequent points that I assigned during grading altogether. So for number 5, the biggest thing is that hardware is not data. So if the kid was doing a self-driving car and they said that they used cameras, camera is not software, camera is hardware. So they had to specify that the camera was being used to collect pictures or to calculate distances. It needs to be a tangible thing. So like data, integers, video, images, even compound artifacts like your GPS position could be counted as actual data being used, but you couldn't just say sensors. That's not data. And they could use programs as long as it actually related. So like if you're using an app organizer, that's something that would be counted as data. And then you actually have to state how it becomes output, which was a little bit hard for some kids. Ones that chose easy ones, not necessarily easy, but ones where it was like, the self-driving car or Fitbits was really easy because, the sensor collects movement and it tracks your steps, and then the output is the display on your wrist. So it was, if you have tangible ones, I would encourage your kids to use really reachable data and be very specific. That's very hard for some kids because they want to just be vague, but they need to just spit it out. That was the big thing for me for criteria 5, was just spit out what it's collecting. Do you guys have any additional for criteria 5?
I would say just saying that it collects data is not specific enough. Oh, it collects data. Again, going just back to that, it has to be, tell us what that is.
Yeah, data is not data.
Another good example that I saw was a lot of times students would write, it collects personal information. Well, what is personal information? It's your name, your address, your phone number, your age, your birth date. So the component here, data, is they were looking for specific pieces of data, something tangible that you could describe as data, not just a generic term that describes a group or a set of data. So like personal information is not a valid response to data.
Exactly. Yeah, just tell them to give examples. So for criteria 6, that's another one that we had in our grading room written just on the board, just so what? So what happens? It has to actually be related to the computing innovation because this one identifies storage, privacy, or security concern. First of all, they have to specify what type of concern they are talking about. They can't just say this is a concern because. They have to specify which concern they're writing about. One of the big ones that I found for a storage concern was they were talking about their own personal phone storage or their phone data. So they said that it would be a data issue if you racked up all your data and then had to pay extra every month. And that's not actually a data concern, that's just a personal issue, more so than an actual concern for data storage. Data storage would be something like the self-driving car constantly collecting data about where it's going on the roads, adding things to the map, constantly seeing new streets, and how much storage that's going to take and cost for not just the consumer, but the companies running the actual self-driving cars. They have to state what the concern is. They can't just say, this is concerning, which I saw a lot for criteria 6. So like an example of what they're actually going to do. So the big so what. For criteria 6, like they could say hackers can get your personal info. So what? They have to state what actually happens with that. So saying if they, if they get your hackers can get your personal information, they can get access to your credit cards, meaning they can rack up your name in a bunch of debt and then you can't get student loans anymore. That's a little bit better of a hacking concern than just hackers have your information, because so what? What are they going to do with it? Do you guys have anything else for criteria 6? Because I know that's kind of a tricky one.
Yeah, this was definitely a struggle for a lot of students. Again, same thing, a couple of things with the storage. I saw a lot of, well, it would use a lot of storage. Again, so what? How much? What's the result of needing that storage? We need specifics. Privacy, same thing. People will know what I'm doing. So they'll know this about me. Again, you have to tell why that's an issue. If there's health data, why is that an issue if somebody knows your health data? Well, maybe it will result in people finding out and that could cause insurance rates to go up and things like that. So again, it just has to be a specific result of that concern. So they have to identify the type of concern and a very, very specific result of the concern.
Right. And then criteria 7, they really had to try hard to not make criteria 7. Criteria 7 is very, very specific that they have to have 3. You have to have 3. They have to be in line. So for ones that had 2, they didn't get the point. Or for ones that had sources at the bottom, but they didn't actually source it in their write-up, they didn't get that point either. And one of the tricky ones that I did see was that you'd have kids that would label it 1, 2, 3 in their write-up, and then in their sources at the bottom, they would not say 1, 2, 3. They just had a list, and then they wouldn't get that point, because you can't assume that 1 relates to that first source, which that one was hard for kids to, it was harder than it should have been for kids to not do. Do you guys have any extra for criteria 7? No, okay. Criteria 7 is pretty straightforward.
We do have a question about criteria 6. And this is coming in a little bit late because of the delay that we have with broadcasting, which is fine, right? You're watching, you have questions, continue to put them into the chat. This is for criteria 6. It says, in addition to being specific, does the concern have to apply to all of society?
It has to relate to a significant part of society. So it doesn't have to relate to everybody, but like self-driving cars can help handicapped people get to where they need to go, right? That's a big enough portion of society to actually affect something. Does that answer your question?
Right, that was for John in the chat. Hopefully he's got that. If you still have questions, he said very helpful, thanks. If you still have questions, continue to put them in the chat. Looks like there's no more questions at this time. Actually, one just came in. For number 7, looking for clarity on inline citations.
Okay, so inline citation means that basically if you're sourcing, I don't know, the New York Times in the sources at the bottom, and you label it like 1 in the bottom you actually put in your sources, you would say somewhere in your write-up, parentheses 1 in the actual write-up. Or you can even put in like, parentheses New York Times. They're not very specific about accepting, like they'll pretty much accept anything as an inline citation. So you can label it 1, you could put the full source in the actual write-up, but it needs to be somewhere in the write-up.
Right. Just to expand on that a bit, there's no specific format. It doesn't have to be MLA or APA or anything specific. As long as you can identify the correlation between what it said in the write-up and which source it goes to was basically okay.
So I see a comment from one of our master teachers that is worth noting here. For criteria 7, the general requirements say to include 3 inline sources, but the specific directions for criteria 7 does not say this. So I believe he's referring to the prompts. So just making sure that you emphasize with your students to do the inline citations when you are presenting the Explore task to them.
And another thing for criteria 7 too is that they have to be 3 different citations. So they have to use 3 separate sources. So you can't use one source 3 times in your write-up. I mean, you can, but you also have to have 2 more.
So just to clarify, the Explore task is about your innovation. There's not necessarily any code associated with it. This is not the Create task. This is the Explore task. All right, I think we're good to move on. So you will be looking at the student samples from the College Board. We showed one a little while ago. There were 5 samples, and now there are 4. One was removed. There's sample A, C, D, and E on the College Board site. Each has an artifact and a written response. You want to go to those, and you're going to look at 2 of them. So it's down at the bottom page here. You're going to pick 2 of those to review and score yourself. Try scoring with the rubric and applying those criteria. You're going to record it according to your master teacher's instructions, whether it's on your portfolio or your form, so check with your master teacher.
I would just say, try to avoid looking at the commentary until you go through the scoring process yourself, and then you can go back and check your work with the commentary and review that with the rest of your PD group. But try to do it without the commentary.
Definitely.
Anything else you want to point out on there, Pauline? Otherwise, I can go back to the PowerPoint.
Nope, that's it.
Okay. So, just any other concerns or questions about the Explore task that we can answer for you today?
And while we wait for questions to come in, I don't see any at this time. While we wait, I actually have a question for our teachers, Deb, John, and Sarah. do you have any tips to share with the teachers who are watching about presenting Explore 2 to their students and how to help their students complete the official tests?
One of the things that I did with my class was for the Explore number 1. I told them up front that I was going to grade it just as harshly as I possibly could, but that I was going to let them correct it. So basically I applied the rubric all over their Explore 1, and I pointed out points where they, you know, may have made a misstep, because for Explore 2, you can't go back and grade it. So that way when they do Explore 2, they had a list of things that they need to look out for themselves. And I let them correct it and earn points back. I'm not cruel.
One of the things that I did during the Explore 1 was to try to encourage collaboration between the students, not on doing the activity, but on reviewing each other's activities. So I would give them time to read out loud their responses to another student. And I would have them print them out and have another student read their response out loud to them, so they could hear what they wrote, to help them to better understand that they need to be very clear in what they're writing. And again, it's a proofreading process. You know, we all need to practice reviewing what we write, but for students, it helped for somebody else to read it out loud to them.
I did pretty much very similar to what Sarah said, in having them, I graded the first one very, very toughly and gave them back, and then, probably not a word, but very strictly, and gave them back to them and let them do some review, tried to get them to do some peer editing. One of the things I plan to do this year is, although we had gone over this examples before, I'm going to spend more time on the student samples that are on the College Board site. I think I'm going to give them highlighters and make them highlight each of the different criteria in a different color to make sure that they're finding all of the criteria, and again, so they can be very specific about knowing what they need to look for and what they need to include. The other thing is making sure, as John mentioned earlier, they're very, very specific in addressing the criteria. This is not, okay, you have a prompt and I want to sit and talk about it for 5 pages. I want to explicitly state each of those criteria and my response to it, so the scorer knows exactly what you're trying to say when, because otherwise sometimes we'd be looking and looking, it's like, this is a great narrative, but the issues still aren't being addressed. And so I guess that would be one of the other things, is to really tell them this is a different style of writing.
And I actually, for criteria 3, for things that are harms, I have a list of things that are not harm, that a lot of kids thought were harm. So barriers are not harm. So people not wanting to do it or to use the technology is not harmful. Hackers are not a harm. That could be used in criteria 6, but not criteria 3 or 4. Cost is not a harm. So having to spend a lot of money on something is not harmful to using the technology. A malfunction and misuse are also not harm. So they have to actually find a harm that's directly related to using the technology.
I don't know if this is worth saying or not, but some of the innovations that were presented as part of the Explore may not, I don't know if they're going to change it or not for next year, but you should try to focus the students or direct them in some way or another in the Explore 1 so that they understand what a technical innovation is. Because we did get some things that were not really innovative. They might have been older things that were implemented a long time ago, but they're not really innovations now, for example. So that might be something else you might want to work on. One of the things that I do is I try to get them to start reading articles and just answering the prompts. So I might have them find an article on technology, something that's of interest to them, and write a short response to the standard prompt. So what is the purpose of this innovation? So they start to understand what an innovation is, something, and then how to practice writing each of the responses to prompts by having them just do one prompt at a time.
There was just a couple logistical kind of questions coming through on the in the chat there, and I think all the information that you guys have shared is really valuable. And I will go back through and kind of type up some notes that we can put in the Teach lesson plan to help supplement it based on your, feedback from participating in the reading process and seeing, lots of student work there. So we will take what we've learned today and incorporate it into the materials then, so that you all can take a look at it there too. Pauline, anything else, or?
Nope, I think we're good. I think more questions are probably going to come up as they start to review the Explore task, and for that, you want to make sure that you take those notes of what your questions are and talk to your master teacher, right? Your master teacher has been through this. They probably have encountered the questions that you have and can guide you. There's also, again, the lesson plan for Explore 1 has already some details in it to help you, and we'll keep updating that as we get more helpful information like we did today. But reach out with your questions to your master teacher or to the forum. And good luck with the sample grading. Try to have a little fun with it.
Thank you. Thank you, Deb, Sarah, and John for joining us today too.
Thank you.